Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone. My name is Tracy Earle from Safe Communities Foundation New Zealand, and along with Megan Brotherton from the Australian Safe Communities Foundation, we are hosts for the webinar today. Before we start, just a few housekeeping matters. We have 2 or 3 presenters lined up for today, and we want this to be interactive, so please ask questions at the end of each presentation. We'll have a few minutes for these questions. Each participant has access to the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen, and so please familiarise yourself with its features. If you are having any problems, please send a message via the control panel and we will try to resolve the issue. If you would like to ask a question during the presentations, please type your question in the question area on the control panel on your screen, or you may wish to put up your hand. To put your hand up, please click the yellow hand on your control panel. At the end of each presentation, depending on the time available, the presenters will try and answer your questions. If for some reason your question isn't answered, the presenters will provide an email address at the end of the session for you to correspond with them personally. This webinar will be recorded and will be available for viewing within the next week. So I'd now like to introduce our first presenter for today, Helen Jowett. Helen is the Trauma Service Manager at the Royal Children's Hospital, Melbourne, Australia, and is going to present on common fall hazards affecting children and young people aged up to 14 years. So over to you, Helen.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. We're just going to go through the trajectory of falls affecting children and young people. I look forward to questions at the end of this presentation. From the time a child starts to roll, crawl, walk and climb, there's an ever-present risk of falls. Bumps, bruises and cuts are common injuries where a child is growing up. For example, learning to walk as well as exploring their surroundings. There are 3 important factors which influence the seriousness of a fall. It's the height that the child can fall from, what the child falls onto, and what the child may hit as they fall. And there are really 3 important things in the mechanism of the fall that we pay attention to when the child comes into hospital. So what do the numbers look like? So over an annualized figure, there's about 31 presentations to emergency. That doesn't account for the amount of people who don't seek help or go to a GP, and about 6,000 hospital admissions, so there's quite a burden there. And there's also an upward trend showing how many cases, are actually presented, and where they happen. Where do falls occur? So we can see from the screen there, they can happen anywhere, whether that's home or at school or out in sporting arenas. They're unexpected, and that's why it's considered an accident. So falls can occur at any time in any place. So what does the data tell us? So if we look at a cohort of patients, about 12,000, I think it's about 12,000 patients over an annual year at RCH. Forearm fractures are without doubt. So the blue on the model on your right screen shows the arms. The children outstretch their arms to fall. The second biggest thing that they hit is the head, which is marked in red. And that's not surprising because a lot of our children are small and the head weighs that much more. So as children fall, the trajectory is that they fall forward and the first thing they hit is their head, whether that's forwards, backwards or sideways. They also tend to injure their arms, which is the humerus, and skull fractures. We do see some intracranial injuries, which is when they're hitting their head, but we see a number of lower leg fractures and femur fractures. And remembering that the femur is the largest bone in the body and the hardest, we have multiple fractures. A lot of the children who come in will not have a single injury. They will have multiple fractures, usually from putting their arms out to brace so that they don't fall. We're going to break this down into babies, toddlers, older children, young children and older children. And today I'm going to start with babies, which is up to 1 year old. So every child needs to have a nappy changed. Of course that, most of us have change tables, and that isn't a problem, but the best recommended place to do it is actually on the floor. Therefore, there is nowhere for that child to fall. Falls from change tables are a common source of injury for children under 6 months of age, and they're often hitting their heads when they're coming down or face, just as they connect with the equipment on the way down. And as I said, the solution to do that is to change on the floor. Some people will choose to do this on a bed. It's not really ideal, especially when they move 3 to 6 months and start to roll, they have a potential to fall and hit something on the way down. So head injuries, facial injuries, very unusual fractures, but sometimes that does exist. Trips and falls. When we think about trips and falls, we're thinking about children, whether they stumble, trip, or fall. But really, we have to think about the adults as well. So when there are toys and clutter, it's much more likely that when we're a little bit sleep deprived from getting up to distress babies at night, that we have the potential to fall. So in order to minimise that, we should really ensure that we have a clear pathway to your child's room and to the toilet before going to bed. And installing a night light is a really practical way of ensuring that we've got sight and we haven't. And on the right, you've got the tibial fracture, which is quite a significant fracture going through tibia and the fibula on the right-hand side. This is all avoidable, and having a clear pathway will assist with that. High chairs. Most children will go into a high chair. It's where they're fed several times a day. This image on the right is what we see normally. The image on the right means that that child is connected with something on the way down. It's a high risk if you're not strapped in, so we ask that you look at chairs that have an Australian standards and fitted with a 5-point harness. Really important to stay with your baby when using the high chair. We understand that sometimes people might want to turn and walk away. And another important point is to make sure that we're not near windows. And if we are, we're half a metre away, or the windows can only open 12 centimetres. Also important not to place that high chair near doors or stoves, electrical appliances, curtains and blind cords. The first few are jammed fingers. Stoves and electrical appliances can cause burns, but unfortunately curtains and blind cords can cause unintentional hanging. And also placing the chair out of reach when it's not in use. It takes up quite a large space on the floor and often can lead to trips and falls by the adults in the family. I have put up a picture on bouncinettes, even though we would certainly not recommend them for the majority of children, and we certainly don't recommend that they're ever put on a table or a bench. If they are going to be used, they can be done on a low surface. It's really important never to carry your baby around in this, and certainly not to put them on raised surfaces. When they have been placed on raised surfaces like the skull fracture on the right, they were up on an island bench and came down and suffered a significant head injury with quite a poor outcome. The next group we're going to talk about are toddlers, and these are a 1 to 4 year age group, and they do exactly what they're called, they toddle. So they become mobile, they start to move, they start to explore, and they get into mischief because everything is, a petri dish to them. They want to know what's going on. They touch, they feel, they see, they do. A lot of our homes now have stairs. They pose a really high risk to babies and toddlers. Their coordination isn't quite what it needs to be. They can often go up the stairs quite well, but they cannot come down. And the solution to help with this is to really secure and attach a purpose-made door barrier to prevent access to the stairs at the bottom of the right, thus avoiding severe facial fractures, contusions, lacerations, as our child has on your screen. Cots and beds. All children will start in a bassinet or a cot and then graduate to a bed, and depending on their age, serious injuries can happen from that. It's quite an elevation from the base of the mattress up to the bed, and one way, as children start to climb and become more mobile, you're probably best to leave the side of that down. If they really are a climber and they want to explore, placing a soft foam mattress on the side is really important. Making sure that your cot meets Australian standards, so it's got the right measurements that children can't get their head stuck and can't be caught. But as most people, children will put their arms out to brace for that fall, and unfortunately this is why the humerus in this picture and this baby child has taken quite a significant hit, which would result in long-term injury, especially as it's quite high up in the growth plate. The other thing that we all have in our house is furniture. We tend not to think about furniture as a dangerous thing, but unfortunately 14 children under 9 years of age died in Australia between 2000 and 2015, which equates to about 1 a year, which is just not acceptable. And we need to be aware that furniture items and televisions that could easily crush our children, so such things as our large screen TVs or a piece of furniture, might look stable, but could topple if pushed or grabbed by a child. Retailers, parents and carers can take steps to prevent death or serious injury, just multi-toppling furniture. There's lots of equipment out now that will adequately secure everything from your ovens to your fridges to your bookshelves to make sure that when they do that, big screen TVs really need to be secured to a wall. They can weigh 30 kilos upwards, and to an inquisitive child who wants to climb and crawl, the first thing they'll do is get up and do that. So please be aware that furniture is a very real hazard. Windows and balconies. A lot of windows are low-lying, and we have lots of balconies in our country. It's really important to install window guards or locks to the upper levels to limit them opening to more than that 12 centimetres I mentioned before, and also not to position furniture so that they can climb up onto it. You don't want to ever go out into a balcony and see chair, tables, planter boxes next to a balcony, because a child, the first thing they will do is crawl and climb up onto that. We need to ensure that the railings are at least 1 metre high with gaps no longer than the 12 centimetres. A balcony entry point should be locked to avoid it being used as a play area. In the 5 to 9 age group, we are still supervising these children, but they tend to self-play, and they're also playing with their peers. And many of us have trampolines in our back garden, but they lead to a lot of hospital entries and anything from cuts, sprains and fractures. They're not suitable for children under 6 years old and should be considered to be sports equipment rather than a toy. It's really important to make a rule that there is only one child on the trampoline at one time, and always use safety padding on the frame. Also regularly check the mat and net for holes, and ensure the springs and the frame are secure. A lot of these trampolines come with nets now, but it's making sure they're zipped up when the children are on will prevent them falling out. It's quite a topical issue because there's lots of trampoline centres, and there certainly is an increase in trampoline injuries. And not only is there an increase in trampoline injuries, there's an increase in severity. When we have a larger child or an adult playing with a child on a trampoline, regardless of whether it's got a structure around it or not, as in a net, it's the disparity of height and weight that leads to some really significant injuries presenting to hospitals throughout Victoria and Australia. Our backyard is a wonderful place for our children to play and explore, but we've often got equipment there, and we've often got landscaping. It's really important that the equipment is appropriate for the child's size, age, and if possible without a hard surface underneath. If we are going to have equipment that's more than 1 metre old for young children or 2 metres for older children, the recommendation is that we place at least 3 centimetres of tan bark, or a more expensive but effective system is a rubberised surface. And good placement of the maintenance of the play equipment will reduce the likelihood of a severe injury. Moving equipment away from poles and fences and trees is important, otherwise you end up with a pretty nasty fracture, as you can see on the right. Bunk beds are a common item in most Australian homes. Falling from the bunk bed or head or limbs being trapped for children under 6 accounts for more than 50%. So not only are they falling, but they also get trapped, and we want to avoid crush injuries at all costs. It's really important to only allow children aged over 9 to use bunk beds, and make sure they have guardrails on both sides and ends, even if one side is up against the wall. Never allow your children to play on bunks. If you plan to use bunk beds in the future, you can buy bunks that are able to be set up as single beds until your children are old enough to use them safely. The same as in other mechanisms of injury, when children fall, they put their arms out to break their fall, and that results in a really nasty fracture that needs operative management. Skateboards and scooters. We will see in this age group, thankfully there's a lot more supervision in this age, so they tend to have a helmet, but we would recommend helmet, wrist guards, elbow pads, knee pads to avoid injuries. We see a lot of children with head injuries because, number one, they haven't got a helmet on, or number two, the helmet is incorrectly placed and it loosely falls off. If they don't have the wrist guards on, they do that protective mechanism where they lean forward and put their hands out and fractured their wrists. On the right is one of our lovely little lads who was doing everything right with his parents, but unfortunately a car reversed out of a driveway. So being ever vigilant as we're going past driveways, coming to T intersections and stops, that we're with our child and really actively supervising close by. But he had a good recovery in the end. Climbing trees is a natural part of growing old and exploring. We see a predominance of tree injuries when children return back to school. I'm not sure if this is because they need to use some extra energy, but it's really important, and we're not saying don't let them climb a tree, but obviously choose suitable trees. Hopefully there's some good soft fall underneath. But what the really important thing to tell our children is that it's very easy to climb up that tree. It's not so easy to climb down. And the child on the right suffered a really significant head injury. You don't have to be a medical practitioner to see the swelling to the left side of that skull and the subsequent bone that had to be removed. So trees are wonderful for our environment, and with close supervision and really actively, monitoring children and telling them the importance, how difficult it is to get down is really would be important. The 10 to 14 years are our teenage group, and they're doing lots of activities that are not under our supervision, and skateboarding is one of them. And whilst the boy in the picture has a helmet on, some knee pads, there's no wrist pads, elbow pads. However, that wouldn't have stopped the injury on the right-hand side, which is a severe injury to his shoulder, which provided a prolonged length of stay. But as long as when we're on skateboards, we can encourage them to have all of the equipment on. We appreciate that this age group is a bit reticent to put the helmet on. It's not so cool in front of their mates, but if we can encourage like-minded behaviour around them, then hopefully that's what we will see. Children of this age will ride, whether it's to school, to work, or for pleasure, and the child on the left has all the right safety gear on, but unfortunately every bike has handlebars. And whilst the injury on your screen may not appear that bad, that is a significant injury to a solid organ injury, and most likely the spleen in this case. So what might look like a little bruise is a really significant injury underneath. Kids, when they're on bikes, they'll have falls from colliding with other people. Unfortunately, when they collide with vehicles, they tend not to have such a good outcome. It's important that we inform them about riding in appropriate areas, as in parks, bikeways, and at all costs avoid being towed by another child or vehicle, which is something that we see in this more high-risk taking behaviour. Ensure the ends of the handlebars of your child's bike are covered to reduce the severity of injury if they are poked by them, and that there's a bike and properly fitted to your child's use. So if they present with an injury like this, it really, really does need to be seen. Football, and in this state we're talking about Australian rules football, we encourage the use of mouth guards. The AFL in junior leagues will support helmets, but it's not recommended or supported in higher age groups. Doesn't mean that we can't use them. Most of our falls happen when we're colliding with another player or with a goal post, and sometimes due to ill-fitting footwear. Children will often use shoes belonging to older brother and sister, so it's really important to have it. It is a responsibility of the grounds and the club to make sure that footy grounds have padded posts, and under 16 as much as possible wearing more high-cut boots, but absolutely ensuring they've got a football, mouth guard. This is a nasty femur fracture that just happened. When we're at this age group, we once again have that disparity. So you will know that teenagers can be all different heights and weights, and we see a huge disparity in that around this age group, that some have reached skeletal maturity and others haven't. So when you have a 40 kilos colliding with an 80 kilos, sadly this is what may happen. Netball and basketball are very common pastimes that we see this age group in, and most of the hazard actually comes from sweaty floors. So children are falling or colliding, but most of them are falling and twisting. And as you can see, this fracture on the right, this child has suffered what we call a spiral, and she has completely twisted and shattered that femur. So it's important to ask the clubs to wipe down the courts during and after play, and encourage the use of knee and elbow pads, and discourage rough play. These are after all supposed to be non-contact sports. We're going to finish with horse riding, very predominant in the female population. injury-wise, next slide will show us what we see, but children who fall off horses often injure arms and legs. However, when a horse comes back on you, you can result in a significant severe pelvic fracture, as we can see on the right. But just to break that down a little bit further for you, in the 0 to 3 age group, it's only about 15%, but it increases 4 to 7, which is not surprising because pony clubs and the rules so state from about 6 years of age up, even though you can ride younger at a pony club or on private property. But if you look at the amount of falls that are happening in the 8 to 11 to 12 to 15 years, it is significant. And the only other comparison that we have in this is opposing for the girls is the boys on motorbikes. So they'll either fall by colliding or fall by just avoiding hitting a train. I hope that answered some of your questions. I'll probably pose some more questions. Falling is an inherent part of growing up. It comes to do with maturity, stability. I have popped some contact details up there. Feel free to email me. I will promise to get back to you as soon as I can. But I think it's important that it is thought that child falls and consequential broken bones are a natural part of growing up, and prevention efforts are seen as promotion. So we certainly don't want to wrap kids in cotton wool or have helicopter hover parents. But falls can and do have a significant physical, emotional, financial consequence for patients, but also their loved ones. When children present to hospital with a minor, moderate, or even a severe fall, it can have a significant impact not only on that child, but all of the family involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen, for your presentation. Certainly a lot of practical considerations there for everyone. We've got a few minutes for questions. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Well, you can always, if you have any questions, you can always contact Helen at her email address. So I'd like to go on and introduce our second speaker for today. Sonia, can you hear me?
Hi, it's Sonia.
Lovely.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sonia Gamblin is the Director of Nursing, Quality and Patient Safety for Hauora Tairāwhiti, which is associated with the Tairāwhiti District Health Board. For those of you that are not familiar with New Zealand geography, Tairāwhiti is also known as Gisborne, and it's situated on the east coast of the North Island of New Zealand. Sonia's position also carries the District Health Board portfolio for quality and risk management. So I'll now hand over to Sonia, who is going to present on falls prevention in her local area.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks very much for inviting me. Very interesting to hear Helen's presentation. Our work has been nationally, regionally and locally more about adults and specifically the older person. So really interesting to hear about falls in children. So as I've been introduced, I'm the Director of Nursing, Quality and Patient Safety at Hauora Tairāwhiti. And in that role I was asked to be a member of the advisory group, a national group to look at falls prevention in older people, because we know that it's a cause of harm when people are admitted to hospital, that they come in for whatever their disease is, and whilst they're in hospital they tend to fall and have a number then of comorbidities and reduced independence following a fall. We know also that patients, when they are unable to live by themselves, also are prone to falls in residential homes. But by far and greater, the most number of falls happen in the community, in people's homes, in shopping centres and the like. So
Sonia, it's Tracy here. We can't see your slides.
Right. Hold on.
Just click on the P down the bottom where it's got your presentation. Yep, that's it.
Can you see it now?
Just click on one of them. You need to click on one of those screens.
Can you see it now?
No, you need it.
Right.
Not clicking on one. You just need to.
I can see it 3 times.
Yep, you just need to click onto one of those.
Yeah, I'm clicking on them. Can you see it now?
No. It goes between the GoToWebinar and your home screen.
Can you see it now?
We can see it on the side. Yep, that's better. We can see something. That's it. Beautiful.
Okay. Yeah, so I was on the expert advisory group, which was looking at falls in all sectors of our community, and by far and away the most happen in people's own homes, shopping centres and in the community at large. So we formed a group to look at how we can prevent falls in all of those settings. So just to give you a little bit of breakdown of the Tairāwhiti region, as a population we are 50% Māori and 50% non-Māori, but looking at those statistics there, you can see that in the older adult there is a significant decrease in the number of Māori represented in our population. So we know that Māori suffer illness, disease and or the associated effects of older people in a lower age group. So to enable patients to receive care in their home or to be assessed for care needs to go to residential care, they are assessed using an inter-eye assessment. It's an assessment of need and looks at a holistic picture of the patient. It's really useful for forward planning for services for elderly in general, but in particular it has a falls risk category. And you can see there that sort of 2/3 of people that are assessed do have a high risk of falls. On our falls prevention group, we have members from Age Residential Care, and they, with their partner organisations, have implemented various aspects of falls prevention, such as signage, monitoring falls on a daily basis, monitoring the area where falls happen, so a bathroom, whether it's in the bed area or the dining room, so that they can look into putting preventative measures in place. And you can see through since October 13, when we started collecting that data, that we did make quite a good impression up to about August 2015. Then we've had a rise for some reason, and we're not sure why that is. And we're starting to tail off a little bit again. Some of the reasons that we thought that rise might be due to is Age Residential Care are known to have quite a high turnover of staff, and so when the prevention strategies were brought in early back in 2013, the staff might have turned over, and so their eye went off the ball, so to speak. Every April in New Zealand we have an April Falls campaign, which sort of reinvigorates the whole campaign nationally against falls prevention. So hopefully this April we'll start to see some significant gains again in Age Residential Care. So the Tairāwhiti Falls Prevention Group, it was formed early in 2013. It was based on the Expert Advisory Group at the national level and consists of multi-agencies such as ACC, that's our Accident Compensation Corporation, Sport Gisborne, who runs some of our green prescription and cardiac rehab programs, aged care, representatives from our PHOs and iwi providers. And over time we developed a strategy with the whole intent was to reduce the incident and severity of injury from falls. And we developed a 3-year action plan to address that. The action plan was actually based on a sort of self-assessment that was put out by the Health Quality Safety Commission of good practice examples to have a rounded, supported environment for older people in relation to falls. And so we use that in our meetings to sort of say where we're doing well and try and think of things to fill the gaps where we're not doing quite so well. Can you still see my picture? Because it just changed on my screen. Hopefully you can.
Yes, all good.
So the ethnicity breakdown for Tairāwhiti, we're going backwards, sorry. Okay, so underpinning our strategy are the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, and you can see the others there on your screen. They're really important to us in that the community has a strong voice in our falls prevention group, and we need to make sure, given our cultural makeup, that the interventions and groups and strength and balance classes and things that we have available to people are culturally acceptable. One of the highlights that's come out of that group, there's several key streams that I want to talk about, but one of them is that we put together a business case to get a nurse practitioner in aged care. She has a falls prevention component to her role, but some of the spin-offs are that she is available to aged care residents and staff, and she's been able to do quite a lot of teaching on falls prevention alongside their partner organisations. And one of the great things that she's been able to do is to increase the vitamin D prescribing in aged care. And whilst that's controversial in some ways, for those that are not exposed to daylight on a regular basis and are very confined to a chair or bed, it has had some good reports of strengthening bones so that should a fall happen, a fracture doesn't result. All our aged care facilities are on board with reducing falls, and we've awarded prizes for them when they have gone over and above what they are meant to do really in their roles. We collect data every month from their facilities, and that's what's been presented in a previous graph to you. The slide you've now got is the vitamin D prescribing in aged care and how that's steadily risen since the nurse practitioner has been in position. At the moment, she can't actually prescribe herself, so this has been by negotiation and talking to GPs about the benefits for this client group. Another string to our bow, if you like, that's fallen out of the falls prevention group has been the creation of the position of clinical nurse specialist for falls prevention. She has developed to become the single point of entry for all our community-based services. She takes falls assessment when she gets the referral and then passes them on to the most appropriate support agency really for whatever their risk is. We've had a lot of referrals from St John. They actually joined our Tairāwhiti Falls Prevention group probably about a year to 18 months ago now, and so having her on the group has been able to infiltrate into St John's better ways of managing falls, because often they're called out just because somebody has fallen and they're not sure whether they need to take them into hospital, whether they can wait and see the GP. But with the nurse practitioner there, she's able to follow up, do a thorough assessment, do prescribing if she needs to, but also can then refer appropriately into the various services. And the other component that we've developed as part of the falls prevention in Tairāwhiti has been a home safety project. And that is a combination of two people, an occupational therapist and a kaiawhina, who are employed to reduce the incidence of slips, trips and falls in people's homes. And so they will go to a person's home, do a thorough assessment, talk to the person about the dangers and risks of falling and the lack of independence that can result as a result of a fall, and thereby get their trust and respect to try and make alterations if required in their homes, such as lighting, declutter, the removal of mats, having things at a sensible height so they don't have to stand on a chair to reach something, all of those sorts of things. One of our other services that we can refer to is called a Steps to Move program. That's run by Sport Gisborne, and that's a community-based strength and balance program. We know that strength and balance really deteriorates in old age, and maybe because of the lifestyles that we're now leading in our 40s and 50s, it's going to be more of a problem as the population ages, and the muscles in the quads and thighs get weaker and weaker, so that if we go to topple, we haven't got the muscle power there to correct ourselves. As well as the strength and balance program, that Steps to Move also has speakers in, and they talk about diet, making sure that your glasses, if you wear them, are nice and clean. Walking with a walking stick is cool, much better than falling, all that sort of thing. You can see the age range of participants there is quite lengthy, 47 through to 86. And they do a functional test prior to the course starting, and then at the end to see the improvements. And just last year we started a falls clinic, and this is aimed for those people that have multiple comorbidities. They have fallen despite interventions in their home, or maybe attending the Steps to Move program, and they're at risk of really another fracture. So the team of the Falls Clinic consists of dietitians, a physician, nurses, OT, physio, and they do a full rounded assessment, have a discussion at the end of the session about each patient, and decide what is necessary, and that might be a medication review, and the physician of the group actually then writes to the GP. So the big message from us really is that falls hurt, many are preventable, and just because you're getting a little bit older, it doesn't necessarily mean that falls go side by side with older age. Many, many, many are preventable. And that's where I'd like to leave it. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Well, thank you, Sonia. I'm sure you've given the participants today some new things to think about. And as Sonia said, has anybody got any questions? It doesn't look like there are any questions.
We've just got someone with their hand up, which is Veronica.
Oh, sorry.
Let me see. Veronica, do you have a question?
Yes. Do I need to write it? Can
No,
you
no,
hear me?
you're on now. We can all hear you.
Oh, great. So I'm from Australia, Western Australia, city of Melville, and we're looking at a socially isolated seniors project at the moment. We've just put forward a grant proposal to some funding that's available for positive ageing. And one of the risks, I suppose, to socially isolated seniors is definitely falls. So I was just really interested to hear whether there had been any correlation made to those who are isolated. I know you talked about the vitamin D and people that are confined to either chairs or homes. But yeah, has there been any data around the correlation between those that are particularly isolated?
We haven't got any data on that, but we do know that social isolation is poor for people and can contribute to bad habits. And we have had anecdotal interviews with patients that have attended the Sport Gisborne program, the Steps to Move program in particular, who were probably in that mindset, had had a fall, didn't really then feel confident to come out and wanted to stay in their own home. But by careful coaching and persuasion over time, not necessarily straight after the event, but when they felt more able, that they have attended the community-based program, and we actually videoed a lady that was totally confined to her house before the program, and afterwards was able to walk around her whole block, which was probably 2 to 3 kilometres.
That's wonderful. I'd love to be able to watch that video if that's available at all, if you're happy to share it.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be fine. I would just need an email address to send it through to you.
If you send it through to the organisers, Sonia, we can then share it with everyone when we send out the recording.
Okay, will do.
Thank you. I'm just wondering now whether, because we will have a steering group to help guide our project, but I hadn't thought about falls, but this, I suppose, has made me much more aware of it, and I think I'll invite the Injury Control Council of WA, who have a real strong focus on falls prevention, onto the steering committee if we get the funding. Thank you.
Thank you. That would be a really good idea. Yeah, key people to have on your falls steering committee would be funding and planning from your DHB and your city council, if you can, as well. Key people.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
So it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Okay, so I think given the actual time, we'll hold off sharing the third presentation, and we'll add that in when we actually do the recording. So Tracy, did you want to do the wrap up?
Sure. So on behalf of all the participants, I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for taking the time to share with us. And as we've said before, please feel free to email any follow-up questions that you may have for our two speakers. Also, a reminder to please fill out the survey on this webinar and let us know of any topics you'd like future webinars to address. We welcome all feedback. Our next webinar will be on the 29th of June, and the focus for that one will be injury data and needs assessments. So as we've said before, a recorded webinar link will be sent out by email to all participants, and it will be available through the Australian and New Zealand Safe Communities websites within the next week. And we're happy for you to share this webinar with your colleagues and networks. So thank you everybody for your time today.
So now to our final presenter for today, Dr. Tommy Rosenberg from Sweden, who's going to talk about an ageing population at risk. Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you, Megan. I'm from Karlstad, Sweden, broadcasting this. And I have, among other organizations, worked for the Swedish Rescue Services Agency and been head of Safe Elderly International. I would like to share some of my experience with you. And when starting this presentation, I came up with help from the Beatles. So you can see, help me if you can, I'm feeling down, and I do appreciate you being around. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please, please help me? And it will be about the elderly and especially falls. Thank you. I'm stuck here, Megan. I can't go. Start with an aging population at risk is a global problem. And we elderly are the people that might stand in your way when you are in a hurry. We like to drive slowly in traffic, and we might annoy younger people. But remember, we have lived long enough to know that speed kills, and being in a hurry is not always necessary. And you are us in perhaps 20 to 30 years. An aging population is a trend in most countries. This reflects that people can hope to live longer and in better health than any time before. But there are side effects. According to the World Health Organization, falls are the second cause of accidental or unintentional injury death worldwide. And all older people, and especially women, are falling so silently. Nobody seems to hear or see their fall. No matter all the statistics, the costs of elderly, nor figures of the consequences of their sufferings seem to bother us. Why? It might be aging. It frightens us to be old. And falling might be seen as an accepted fact that people do fall when they get older. But the problems will increase in magnitude over the years. Could it be ageism? Elderly people are seen and evaluated differently in various countries. And it's not only about ageism and being old. I think also it's a gender problem. So let us all open our eyes to see the great need to improve safety for people. And it's time for a global attention and actions. We are all worth it. In Sweden, in 2016, we had a population about 10 million people. Of these, some 20% are over 65 years old. And about 94% of them live at home. We have also problems except falls concerning suicide, but violence is not so not a big problem here. The elderly people's deaths, sufferings and loss of quality time is argument enough for a national prevention plan, but so far in Sweden we have none. And it's a problem for Australia too, as you can see from the fall-related hospitalizations by age group in 2011 and 12. And the fall-related hospital data. And in the United States as well, 1/4 of Americans aged 65 plus fall each year. And there are costs, not only lives, but for our economy. New Zealand is also facing a problem about safety for elderly people. and trying to do something about it. Here is from 2013, the Minister for ACC, Nikki Kay. From this picture you can see that elderly people in Sweden are overrepresented in injuries, and especially falls. As you can see, we don't have too many accidents with elderly people on MC or in violence. The number of deaths in falls 65 plus in Sweden up to 2010 you can find on this picture. And the prognosis for development in 2008 and 2050 in Sweden, you can see we have more than enough problems coming up. We need to work more with prevention. And the prognosis for hospitalized elderly persons also shows that we have big problems ahead of us if we don't do something about them now. So it's a challenge for us all. It's an elderly wave in the world. Elderly people have multiple diseases. And ethnicity. How do we develop effective promotion prevention in a multicultural, multilingual society? Big challenge. And we need to go from focus on details and repair to promotion and prevention. And that's more easily said than done. And the gender perspective, what about it? How do you work with that? Major problem, I think. We need to put more focus on value-based guidance like quality of life, healthy environment, organizational efficiency, etc. What has been done in Sweden? Let me give you some examples. Already in 2005, we got an OECD report on our work. And they said that we need to appraise our work, especially concerning management to prevent falls. The Swedish Rescue Services Agency had a program for senior safety in 2002 and 2005, where we work with facts, methodology, information to the elderly, education, and we also had management courses. What about your country? We also made some important reports concerning accidents and figures and the injuries among elderly people in Sweden. We made a handbook on systematic work for senior safety, and we tried to explain the differences between communities concerning falls among the elderly. We also have statistics. We've done some education in our county. About 16 municipalities participated. And in 2007, a senior knowledge center for senior safety was formed, Karlstad Community, Värmland County Council, and Karlstad University. The center was thought of like an engine for development alongside with the ordinary system. We should focus more on knowledge, methodology, education especially, and communication, and why not lobbying. This center worked from 2007 up to 2011, and from that time it's a part of Karlstad University called CPS. Some articles from Center for Personal Safety in Karlstad University, you can find it here. I will especially point out the last, number 3 there. We've been working somewhat with impact absorbing flooring as an aid for elderly people. Of course, we have been working with indicators for safe elderly, as many of you have done. And it's based also on a continuous safety improvement process, where you start to first work with trying to find out what is the risk picture. Then you look into what about your planning and organization. Does it work? Look at your actions. Are they functioning as you think they are? Good for the elderly people? And do you evaluate your work? And how do you do that? You need to do that in order to improve. And as you can see, it's not only a circle, it's a spiral, because knowledge increases when you are working with this continuously. Safe and secure special housing in Nacka municipality, we have 4 so far. And we try to make them do their self-evaluation, find their strength and improvement areas. And they focus very much on what is done. But we also need to focus on how the work is done. So we gave them some examples or questions to be answered. What are the goals for your work? Describe how the goals were set. Describe how the goals are communicated to not only elderly people, but their relatives and the community as a whole. We must always remember that the seniors are in focus. It's the elderly. So far we focus very much on costs and problems and figures about death. But let's think about the elderly's ability. How do we use that? Do we see seniors as a resource? Do we engage them? Do we use their knowledge? Do we use their experience? Ask questions and remember what Beatles said a long time ago still is valid. There is nothing you can do that can't be done. All you need is love. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy.
Did it work?